Welcome back to the Wandering Pilgrims podcast. Thank you for joining us again as we continue our discussion on Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Quick little recap, I guess. Best way to go about it. First off, spoiler alert. Trying to remember to be better about that if you haven't read the books. I'm really bad about forgetting that. But this book was written by John Bunyan in the 1600s. For hundreds of years, it was the second best-selling book after the Bible. And as we've gone through this, I think we know why.
Yes.
They definitely go hand in hand. If you're interested in hearing all of the other episodes, we are on episode 7 of this discussion, so feel free to check out episodes 1 through 6 to see how Christian's journey began and progressed to this point. It's about a man named Graceless/Christian who takes the straight and narrow path to the celestial city. And let's see. Last episode was a lot of dialogue.
Yes.
So I don't really want to... I was trying to figure out how I could summarize this, but I don't...
quite a bit of dialogue.
I don't know that I could really summarize it, but basically they kind of addressed prosperity gospel, things of that nature. A lot of monetary money things going on in that dialogue, and symbolism as well. So feel free to check that out. That would have been episode 6 of our discussion. But that pretty much gets us back to where we were, because when we left them off, they had found this nice river, the river of life, where there were trees they could eat from, and they could rest and drink the water, and they're refreshed. So that's where we left them. It seemed like a very nice place to leave Christian and hopeful, especially considering we knew what was coming in the next part. So, without anything else to add, you ready to dive in?
Yes.
This episode of the Wandering Pilgrims podcast is sponsored by Anchor, the easiest and fastest way to record, edit, and distribute your podcast. We love Anchor and the Anchor app. We've used it from the very beginning. It's so user-friendly, whether you're a beginner or veteran. It's free to use with tons of editing tools and free music to use, just to name a few things. They also take care of distributing your podcast to all major podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google, and so many more. So if you're looking to get into podcasting but don't know where to start, download the Anchor app or visit anchor.fm to get started today. So, I'm trying to figure out how best to get into this part, because it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Not quite as heavy as Vanity Fair, I don't think, but very close.
Yeah, it's close.
Very close. But
it's dark.
yeah, it is dark. So when they leave the river of life and start back on the road, pretty quickly it turns rocky and rough. Very rough. And
the path.
Yes, the straight and narrow path is very rocky and very rough. So, I mean, I think of it as like an extreme level hiking trail rough.
Yeah.
That's all I can really relate it to.
Yeah, their feet start to hurt.
Yeah, their feet are killing them. So, they keep going on as far as they can go, at a very slow pace at this point. And they notice that there's this little fence. They call it a stile in some books.
Yeah.
Some versions. And it's, it's easily hopped. It's not too high for people.
Yeah.
But it's called Bypath Meadow.
Yeah.
So I think of springtime and lambs grazing in meadows. So super green is what comes to mind next to this super hardcore rocky path. And their feet are killing them.
Yeah.
And the wall or fence seems to follow this path.
Yeah, for quite a ways.
Their path, as far as they can see.
Mm-hmm.
So Christian has the idea of, well, let's hop this fence and we'll follow the wall or the fence.
Yeah.
And it'll be, it'll give our feet a rest. It follows the path, so we won't lose sight of it. And when the path clears up a little bit and gets a little easier,
we'll
hop back over.
Yeah.
Right? Well, Hopeful was a bit reluctant to hop the fence. But eventually, he just kind of gives in to what Christian is trying to get him to do. So they both end up hopping the fence. Now, if you have read the book before or have listened to the other podcasts about it or are doing some combination of those, at this point, we should all know that if you are taking the easy way out, it's not going to end well.
Nope.
Because it's cheating. And they didn't realize that just out of sight, the meadow and the fence and the path go their separate ways.
Yep.
So they're happy their feet are feeling better. Trudging along this meadow, which is nice for now. And they happen to see another person, another man, who's walking in the meadow, whose name happens to be Vain Confidence. So he's quite sure of himself and everything he says.
Yeah.
So they ask him. I think Christian asked him. What was that for? It looked like you just had a realization,
Sorry,
epiphany.
It's funny. It's one of those things. I didn't get it until now, but reviewing this today so that we can do this podcast, I was also listening to another podcast that had nothing to do with this. And they were talking about doubt and how sometimes it's a good thing.
Yeah.
For good people.
Doubting yourself?
Having a little bit of doubt.
Kind of checks you.
It checks you.
Yeah.
But always those people that were the high school quarterback that never went anywhere, but never forgot that he was the high school quarterback.
Uber confident.
Those uber confident people that you knew never had any. They were always
sure of themselves.
Yeah. Vain confidence.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just clicked in my head.
Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely sure of everything that he said and everything he was doing in this meadow. So when Christian asks him, where are we going? Where are you headed? And of course he says, I'm headed to the celestial city. So this leads to the celestial city? Of course it does. Of course it does. Now, they don't end up walking together like some of the others. The Vain Confidence guys
behind.
Seems to be at least a decent distance from them. So then it starts to get dark. So it was all fine and dandy in the meadow, in the field, in the daylight. But then it starts to get dark.
Very dark.
And you have no path in the meadow to help you know where to go in the dark. So they're kind of just stumbling along. And Vain Confidence, when it gets dark, can't see where he's going. So he falls in a pit.
Yep.
Vain Confidence, sure of himself, walked right into a trap.
Yep.
Because it was a trap, which they tell us It wasn't just some hole ditch in the ground that naturally occurred. Mm-hmm. It was a pit that was put there on purpose to catch. And it says vain, like vain, confident style travelers. Yeah. Like specifically for these kinds of people who are sure of themselves. Yeah. And it says it was put there by the prince of that place. Mm-hmm. I'm still a little foggy on who they're referencing. Like,
well, they're either...
Because catching vain, confident travelers who are sure of themselves and sure of their way to the celestial city. Mm-hmm. Which prince?
Well, I would assume it would be Beelzebub. Because the character we're fixing to learn about also works for him.
Yes, but could you argue that the prince of the celestial city put it in the path as a trial for vain, confident people who had no doubt?
I mean, maybe, but that's not really his style.
I know it's not. It doesn't specify. So I've kind of mulled over all the different options, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, they referenced to another prince, so I wonder how that could play. And that was just kind of the only offshoot I got as potential for that. I would think more likely Beelzebub, but I always try to play every angle in my head when I have a unknown to try to figure out. But I mean, that would make the most sense because once he fell and they heard him fall.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't coming out.
Nope. They just hear him groaning.
Mm-hmm. Because they're calling for him and they're like, okay, well, heard this awful sound. Like to know if you're alive and what we're going to face. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing they can do for him at this point. And they couldn't find him.
Yeah, they can't.
I mean, they tried.
Yeah.
They did try. So props to them for being good people. But so bad gets worse as taking the easy road often does. And then they have this storm that comes up.
Yep.
Super bad. Super bad thunderstorm. Lightning, thunder every few seconds, torrential rain. You know, it's not just a little bit of a drizzle. Yeah. It's inconvenient.
It's a heavy rain.
No, it's bad.
And they can't see in the first place.
For the torrential rain. On top of the darkness. Yep. Now you have cloud cover, so any moon or starlight you had is gone. And you're going to get smacked in the face with water. Yeah. As you walk.
So they turn around. They decide to turn around and try to go back.
They do. But before they do, Hopeful just kind of loses it. Yeah. Hopeful despairs. Which is not something you see very often, which we're going to find out is a big deal. But he's upset for having gone out of the way in the first place. And Christian's like, how could we have known? Nothing we looked at told us that this would be bad, or that we would run into problems, or that we would lose sight of the path, or anything in faith. Or, see, I still want to say faithful so bad.
I know.
Hopeful. It's just like, well, I kind of knew. And I tried to tell you that I didn't want to leave the path. Yeah. But because, how did he put it? That he was
because you were older.
He didn't want to argue or didn't think he should argue. Yeah. So how often does that happen? People not wanting to argue. People that they have a good, we call it a gut feeling. You got a gut feeling about something and you really don't think you should do that, or you know better and you really don't think you should do that. But you don't want to argue with somebody. Yeah. You don't want to look bad in front of them. Or maybe they're older, cooler. At least that's how it used to be when we're in school, right? Yeah. The cooler, older kids influence you or whatever. Try to get you to do stuff, and you don't want to let them down. You don't want to go against them. You're not cool then, right?
Yeah. Well, Christian is also, he's not only older. Yeah. He's a teacher to Hopeful.
That's true. He's older in the faith.
Yeah. I mean, just when they're at the pillar of salt. He can't read what's on the pillar, so he gets Christian, and Christian like figures out what it says.
Yeah.
And it says it's because he's more learned.
Yeah.
Than Hopeful is. So, I mean, that stems from it too.
Yeah.
Well, Paul talks about this in his letters to Timothy.
Is that where it is? I know we talked about it. I believe
so. He talks about it in his letters to Timothy, talking about how young men should have respect for their elders, but also realize that they don't know everything.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to look up the verse in my head.
If you have a question, or ask it.
Yeah.
Question them.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember the verse. There's one specifically sticking out in my head, but it has to do with don't let people tell you that just because of your age, it's you can't be this or you can't influence in this way.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are older that they may not have taken it up until they were older to begin with.
Yeah.
So maybe they're younger in their faith. So, whereas there are some kids that just take to it like fish to water. So,
yeah.
I really want to look that verse up. But, let's see. So, there was one particular quote that I liked a lot. And I don't typically write down the quotes because I'm not doing the quotes at the end right now. But the quote was, easier to go out of the way when we're in than to go in when we're out.
Yep.
And I love little snippet phrases like that because you can hold on to them and carry them with you really easily and remember them very well.
Yeah.
So you can bring it to your mind whenever you have a situation that you kind of think you shouldn't leave the path, but they're pulling on you pretty hard. Remembering something like that that's just quick and easy. It's easier to go out of the path when you're in it than to get back to it once you're out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fall off the wagon.
Pretty much. Yeah. But the wagon keeps going, so now you got to chase it.
Yeah, now you have to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean... So they did turn back and decide to try to find the path and go back the way that they came as best they could. Because at this point, the torrential downpour is flooding this by day lovely meadow.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work out in their favor. And they end up just having to try to take shelter and wait it out. The problem with that is it's nighttime. You've walked a really long way. Now you have to walk a really long way back. And you're taking shelter and resting. What happens when you do that? You sleep.
Yep.
So asleep they went. That didn't end well.
Nope.
Because in the morning, we find out whose land they're on. And... should I say person?
No.
It's not really a person.
It's not a person. He's a
giant.
Giant.
They are on giant.
It's phrased that way for a reason.
It is. It is. Because he is giant despair. And anybody who has ever despaired or found themselves in depression knows
it's giant.
It is giant. So he goes out, just surveying his fields, meadows, and whatnot. He finds them. They're trespassers. So he catches them, and he takes them and imprisons them for trespassing on his land in his home, which is called Doubting Castle. So, depression and doubt. despair and doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Those two go together so often in life.
Yes.
Because most of the time when you're trying to get out of being depressed or in a state of despair, there's always something in the background causing you to doubt your progress, or that you can even make it out of that hole, or make it out of the castle, or off the land, or I can't outrun this, I can't outfight this. So why try? So I think that this is, we have so many people nowadays who suffer from things like depression, anxiety, despair, just all of this darkness. And nobody knows how to get out of it. It's certainly not easy for anyone.
No.
That's why I really like this part of this book. So he locks them up. And I think they said it was like a week or 10 days or something like that. And the giant, of course, has a wife. And her name is Diffidence, which I know I looked up somewhere, but I cannot find what it means. But she counsels him, because they were still alive after several days. They give them no food, no water. They're in the darkness.
For days. Yeah.
And she's like, beat them. Make them wish they were never born. Beat them within an inch of their life. Okay. All right. So he does. Lashes them, beats them mercilessly.
With a big club.
Well, he is a giant. So clubs are a pretty good giant weapon of choice. And then, of course, he locks them back up.
Yep.
Back to their dreary existence, just worse for the wear. So, the next day, they're still alive. So the wife tells him this time that you should help them end themselves. Encourage them to end themselves. So in Doubting Castle, ruled by despair/depression, you're encouraged by that to end yourself. That seems like pretty close to the bottom of desperation.
Yep.
And depression. So he does. He gives them all kinds of things. Knives.
Like poison.
I think he gave them several different options, if you want to call them options.
Yeah.
And of course he's telling them, just do this. You shouldn't even still be alive.
Yeah. If you don't, I'm going to keep beating you. You're never getting out of here.
You're never getting out of here. You're never going to leave. You're never going to see the sunlight again. So just go ahead and do it. The problem was that while he's doing this in his enraged talk to them, he has a fit. That's how they describe it. A fit. And he can't use like his hands and stuff. And they make a point of saying that it's due to sun shining weather.
Yeah, it happens a lot to him when the sun is shining.
Interesting. So, and I figure we'll discuss this more once we get through the plot points. Because you kind of need to get through the plot points before you can really dig in to discuss it all. Because it really needs to be discussed as a whole. Don't you think?
Oh, for sure.
So, he gives them the weapons to end themselves. And then he has his fit. And then he leaves. So, they talk it over. They know, though, that this is wrong. This is against the law. of their prince.
Yeah.
And so they decide not to do it. So, after their long night, a lot of discussion, Giant Despair gets up the next day and goes and checks on them again, fully expecting them to have ended themselves. And then he finds them alive.
Yep.
And that just makes him super angry.
Super angry, yeah.
And he gives them another huge beating. So, by the time night rolls around again, Christian is back in the depths of despair and full-on depression. Yeah. And it hit him harder because they were there because of him.
And he's thinking about it. He's legitimately thinking about taking his life.
Yeah.
And he's talking with Hopeful.
Yes.
And Hopeful brings up the fact that their king commands them not to murder.
I think this was the first night.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that doing it to yourself is even worse.
Well,
in a way.
Yeah. The way he describes it is that to murder another person is to kill their body. But for you to do it to yourself
is your body and soul.
Is your body and soul.
And this second night, you go ahead.
He talks him, Hopeful.
He talked him off the ledge the first night.
Talks him off the ledge, yeah.
And this night, after being beaten again, if I remember right, he starts reminding him of all of the things that he's already overcome. And I find it interesting that really the only real time we ever see Hopeful despair, even a small bit, was in the meadow.
Yeah.
And it was more because he knew better and didn't act on what he knew.
Yeah.
But throughout this entire thing, and I think we've said it before, but Christian, as we look at him as a Christian, makes it on this journey by having faithful and hopeful.
Yeah.
And he had them both when he needed them. Faithful helped him learn and learn how to stay on the straight and narrow. And then hopeful keeps him from getting... Yeah. I mean, he keeps him from the edge.
Yeah.
Here. The only thing that kept depression, despair, and doubting castle at bay for Christian was hopeful. Now, the man in the cage was screaming, "No hope."
No hope.
And he was alone.
This is back
at the interpreter's house.
This is back in the interpreter's house. One of the later things that he sees is a man in a cage who makes...
It's unlocked.
It's unlocked. And the door to the cage is like kind of barely open.
Yeah.
But he won't get out of the cage.
No.
And he makes all these excuses, blaming God and
blaming himself.
And blaming himself and all of this stuff. He's completely lost hope.
Yeah.
That he can ever get out.
And looky there. When he was given help this time, he was given hopeful.
Yep. As
a companion. Somebody was put into his life that he would need as much as hopeful needed him.
Yeah.
And I love that part of this story. So, hopeful keeps him from doing anything crazy that night. So, the wife's talking to Giant Despair again. Tells him, you need to show them the bones in the yard and tell them that this is their fate in like a week or like 10 days, or something, right? And then she gets to thinking. And she's like, they have this hope that they shouldn't have. Which makes me think either they know somebody's coming or they have a way of escaping.
Yeah.
And this seems to have never occurred to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Giant Despair's like, oh, well, tomorrow I'll search them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make sure they don't have anything to pick the lock or whatever. So, here's Christian and Hopeful again, battling despair in Doubting Castle, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it by praying all night long.
All night.
All night.
Yeah.
And just before dawn, so just before Giant Despair wakes up and gets on with his morning routine of beating people, he starts laughing.
Yeah.
Like a crazy person.
Yeah, Christian, he just breaks out into like a rant.
Yeah.
Like a fit.
Yeah.
He's like, oh my God.
Because he remembered.
I have this key.
The key of promise. And that key, as he said, I believe will open any lock that I needed to. And guess what? It opened the lock to the cage that they were in. Opened the lock to the door to the castle. Every lock they came to, it opened. Now, the last one was the gate.
Yep.
It was a big iron gate, right? Well, iron gates are squeaky.
Yeah.
And they're heavy. Especially, like, for a normal person with a normal-sized gate. Not a giant-sized gate for a normal person. So, they had a hard time getting that lock open just because.
Yeah, it made a lot of noise.
And they made a lot of noise. And they woke the giant up. Now, keep in mind, this all started right before dawn. Right before sunshine. So, by the time they're at the gate, guess what's coming up? And it wakes the giant up. But when he gets to the yard, he falls into one of his fits because of the sunshine. And so Christian and Hopeful book it back to the path. And they decide that they are going to take the time to put up a sign to warn other pilgrims that will come after them of what is in this meadow, whose meadow it is, what lays beyond, what will happen.
Yeah,
like, do not get in this meadow.
Is.
Yeah. So, I just think that, I know typically we talk about each point as it comes in our episodes, but this one just seemed better to lay out the plot points and then discuss it as a whole.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about despair and depression and trying to come out of that, it's hard to break that into pieces. So, I don't know, where do you even begin to discuss this?
Yeah.
And I know that you found a lot of information and had a lot of thoughts on Doubting Castle and Giant Despair while we've been doing this.
Yeah. Well, depression is something that I've personally dealt with. And I know quite a few people who have as well.
Yeah.
And I dealt with it for a long time. And the only thing that fixed it was learning that I had a key. That was it. Because if you think about how I was 5 years ago versus
now
where I'm at now, I'm a completely different person.
Yeah. And the funny part is that 5 years ago you believed. It's not like you found salvation. But I think we both wrestled with it in our own way. We didn't know where the key was. Yeah. And now we found the key and we found it together. So it helped both of us in different ways, I think. And the funny part about this book is it can help you grow whether you read it once or you read it 100 times.
Yeah.
It'll just keep helping you grow as you mull it over in your head. And it'll remind you of something that you see in the world that day that you'd forgotten about or whatever. And you compared Pilgrim's Progress to a key.
Yeah, it is.
To a map key.
To me, at least, it is. And I think for a lot of people it was. And that's why the book was so popular for so long, is that you have this map. I had a map, and that map was the Bible. The Bible is this very large book that you can get lost in.
You can.
If you don't know
what you're doing,
or how to read it. If you don't know how to read the map,
how to study it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that strikes me about that now is you don't have Pilgrim's Progress in church, and you don't really have a lot of people being taught how to read the Bible for themselves. You have workbooks for Bible study now, or well, if it's even called Bible study.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's a small group or something like that. Those used to be where you were taught how to read and discuss the Bible and how to learn from it. And you just don't have that a lot anymore. So you have these people that may be looking for answers, and they know that it should be in the Bible. But when you open it, it's just this massive amount of information, and you don't know where to start. If you're dealing with a particular issue, like, where do you start? I mean, for me, I got lucky.
Yeah.
I had enough knowledge to know that when I was at my darkest, just hit your knees, and before I opened the Bible, I prayed, and I'm like, I need help.
Yeah.
Which is ironic.
Ask for
since that was Christian's thing. And just asked for it to be shown to me what I needed to read. And it was Psalms.
Yeah.
And it worked. It was my hope in my darkest time. Most people don't have that. They don't know where to begin.
But the best thing to do, if you want to read it, is just start at the beginning. And just like any other book, start at the beginning and read to the end. And that's how it's put together, is for you to read from the beginning to the end.
I hope that we can do that one day. It's hard to do. It is hard to do.
Yeah,
so that's why I've always been one to say, if you're going to sit down and read it and you don't think that you can do like the first 5 books, let's be honest, because by the time I tried once. By the time I got to Leviticus and I'm reading law after law after law, and then I know Chronicles isn't far behind, and it's he begat.
Yeah.
I was ready to like scream, because I'm like, I didn't have enough knowledge to understand context of all of this information and how to study it really. So I'm trying to go through this, and I'm like massaging my temples as I'm reading it. I'm like, I can't retain any of this. I don't know that it even has anything to do with me.
Well, the good thing is as far as retaining it, is that the book's not going anywhere.
Hopefully.
You can read it as many times as you want to read it.
We're lucky enough to say that right now, and I would like to say that we're lucky enough for that, at least in English speaking. We're on due to William Tyndale at large, and it was the anniversary of his burning this week.
Yeah.
Actually. We owe a lot to that man.
Yes, we do.
So, but anyway, I agree that you should read the Bible as complete as possible, but if you don't think you can sit down and do it that way, at least do like we do. We do 1 Peter. We do the whole book if it's small. And if it's something as huge as Genesis, we end it where the end of a narrative would be. Yeah. Like we do all of Joseph, or we do all of, all of the creation. And you got to be careful when you're breaking it up, because if you break it up, which, let's be honest, most people can't study the whole of Genesis in one sitting. You have to know how to break it apart so you don't lose narrative points. plot points. I hate to use plot points, but
but
context.
Yeah.
Context is probably the best word. So you have to be careful when breaking it apart so you don't lose context. That's also why I'm a note taker.
Well, the idea, part of the idea is that, like, you read through Genesis and you read through the Old Testament, and then by the time you get to the New Testament, when you start hearing or reading what Jesus is talking about and what he's referencing when he's telling
you have that information,
people the good news.
Yeah.
You can go, oh, I remember that, and go back, and this is what he's talking about. Yeah.
It's a refresher rather than going and learning, flipping back and forth, which interrupts your narrative and interrupts your context if you're flipping back and forth, trying to understand it all.
Yeah, it's not the best thing to, let me read this chapter and verse. Then let me go over here and read this chapter and verse. And then go way over here and read this chapter and verse.
We've talked about just quoting verses in and of themselves.
Yeah.
Half the time, you don't get full context.
Yeah. Well, people like to quote letters.
Especially,
Like Paul's letters or...
I mean, Proverbs is probably one of the only ones that's kind of like quotable.
Yeah.
Because they're Proverbs. They're set up that way so that you can remember them. Mm-hmm. And even some of the Psalms, some of them are shorter. It's easier to remember them, and it's relatively quotable. Mm-hmm. But
if you read Psalms as a whole,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it the way that Psalms, these different songs and poems, the way that they read together, the way that they flow.
Yeah.
Your prayers of lament and your prayers of praise, and
it's very up and down.
Things.
It's the highs and lows of life.
It's supposed to flow the way that it's supposed to flow for a reason. Mm-hmm.
I would not recommend reading the book of Job if you're in despair.
It helped me. Well, it's one of the books of wisdom.
It is, but maybe not like break them in on Job. Start them off.
Well, I think it's supposed to. The way you're supposed to read the books of wisdom would be Proverbs.
It's Ecclesiastes,
right? And then Job.
Yeah, don't start with Job. I don't recommend starting with Job.
Yeah.
Because you really need the other information before you dive into that. But back to what I was saying before is, like, I was a believer, and I had a very small amount of knowledge. Yeah.
I wasn't very learned in Scripture.
Yeah.
I'm not now. I know more.
Yeah, we know a little bit more.
But I'm by no means
a
scholar.
No, we aren't. But we do know a little better of how to go about doing this.
Exactly. And in part, a lot of it is because of this book, for me at least, is it's the perfect key to have for the Bible, along with other books.
Yeah.
But I have a very tiny amount of information that I have studied, and my life has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
So I can only think about how much it will have changed in another 10 years. Or another 5 years of study.
Yeah.
The good thing is the study never ends.
Yeah.
Like, if you're legitimately thirsty for it, then that thirst won't go away. So you'll only ever learn more and become...
That also goes to the ways that you can tell a false teacher or false prophet from a real one. It's by the fruits of their life.
Yeah.
Don't listen to what they say. Look at how they are. It goes back to actions versus words. Yeah. I mean, just basics. Actions versus words. How are they truly as a person? not just what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you have truly got deep enough with your faith, like it's gained real knowledge, not just the superficial routine kind of Christianity we're used to at this point, where you've actually had time and chosen to study it, because it's a choice. You can tell when a person really has, because they're different. And I mean, there's at least one person that comes to mind that I didn't know them when they studied it. I know I didn't know them when they studied it. I believe they still were. But you could tell that person, he had such a life change because of what he had known. You could just tell it in how he acted, how he was. And I've hardly ever seen that. I see it with you now, but you don't see a true thirst and hunger for it, because we're not taught that we need to. We're not, like, you're taught that you can watch the Bible on TV, the show, and you'll get the gist. Or you can watch some YouTube videos with Bible songs, and it'll help you get the gist, or whatever. Or you can do a workbook. We'll do a workbook from beginning to end. It only takes 24 weeks. We'll meet once a week, or maybe it takes the whole year. Some of them do take the whole year. But you'll know enough to go evangelize the world by the end of this year or this 6 months or whatever. And I genuinely hope that those books are helpful. But are they as helpful as the original?
Yeah.
And you're going to send these people out into the world with this second, third-hand book knowledge to evangelize the world. Can they teach the people they're going to evangelize how to read the Bible?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not just adults either. They do
they
this
start
with children.
With children.
Like when there's a kid that goes to, like, youth group or something like that, and they leave a little note or whatever saying that, like, they want to learn more or whatever, and people go to their house. They take kids. And kids are the ones who... Now, I'm not saying kids can't be as learned as an adult.
Yeah.
But, like, we just talked about that a little bit ago.
Which specifically?
Is a child equipped enough
to be salt and light to the world?
Absolutely not. World.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
If they're not equipped enough to make the decision to be saved, how are they equipped, well, quote unquote, to find salvation? Because I still don't like that. To find their salvation and understand their salvation and how to live a life. No, they are not equipped to be salt and light to the world. How can they be?
Yeah.
I don't know how. I was able to argue Bible with people when I was in school, and I knew hardly nothing. I know way more now than I did then, thank goodness. But I knew more than them. I knew enough to be able to argue a point. Typically with somebody older. Yeah. But I wasn't evangelizing in high school.
Yeah. Well, see, a lot of that has to do with the lack of life experience.
Well,
like if you talk with anyone
how
over
many
time,
of them have gone through a Pilgrim's Progress?
Yeah.
Kids have not had the time to really go through.
They haven't even had the time to get to the wicket gate.
Yeah. So you have to be very careful the situations you put them in. And that's why, I mean, I know a lot of people, their kids love children's church, and I understand that their kids love children's church. Ours loved nursery. But I grew up sitting in the pews. I heard what the pastor said. I might have sat there quietly coloring.
Yeah.
But I wasn't And I mean, but that was how my family was. They didn't shove me off to a kid's table.
Mm-hmm.
I was allowed to be a part of the family and the family conversation, provided that I acted right
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't interrupting every 5 seconds or jumping up and down or anything. Why do we think that the Word of God should be dumbed down for our kids?
Yeah, well, to
that undermines our kids.
Well, to point that out, what he was saying before, to reference what Faithful was saying during his trial,
mm-hmm.
anything that you have added or taken away is a lie.
Yeah. I mean, are we really equipping our children by sending them into a room and having them sing Noah has an arky? I'm not saying that it's not catchy.
Yeah.
And that it can't help with memory. Kids like singing.
Mm-hmm.
They like music. I've found a resource right now to help teach hours through music.
Adults like singing.
Yeah.
Adults like music.
And music is a great way to utilize memorization
mm-hmm.
because it triggers other parts of your brain
mm-hmm.
instead of just drudging through trying to memorize things.
Mm-hmm.
So it can make it fun.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with helping them along and giving them other resources to help them remember things. Because
mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be written on your heart.
Yeah.
God loves music.
Mm-hmm.
God told them several times to put things to song.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least once. At least once, maybe not several. I remember one specifically. But I don't know. I mean, this is a bit of a rabbit hole for us. But I personally believe that kids should not be...
Yeah, we just need to do a rabbit hole episode.
Just a general discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Let's talk about everything.
Yeah. Well, that might not be a bad one.
Getting back to before. So depression is exactly how he describes Doubting Castle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dark place where the light barely penetrates. And if it does, it's fleeting. It's only for a moment.
Hope is the only way.
You're in there. At least for me.
Yeah.
I would be in there for days.
Yeah.
Like a week at a time. And it's this dark, dank, nasty place that the longer you're in it, the heavier it gets, and the more it squeezes, the smaller that room gets.
See, mine was different. Mine was a never-ending bad mood.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was hot.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was like anger.
Yeah.
Like just anger. I mean, I'm not saying that there wasn't dark, more sad notes at points, but I had there was a lot of anger there with mine.
Mm-hmm.
No particular reason. It just kind of manifested itself that way. And then it'd be like hot anger all day, and I'd be ready to fight whoever crossed my path
mm-hmm.
for whatever.
Yeah.
And then at night, that was when the darkness would set in. If it was going to set in, it set in at night, and it would set in deep.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you want to talk about the perfect advice and allegory style solution to somebody going through
mm-hmm.
depression.
Yeah.
It's this.
Yeah.
And it's simple.
And it's hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
This is not a new thing.
I love the sunshine part.
Yeah.
Get out of your hole.
Yeah.
Get into the sunshine. Stop. Because how often is it that when you're in that state of mind, you start buying heavy blankets
mm-hmm.
and blackout curtains, and you leave the lights off. The only thing that illuminates your life is the TV.
Yeah.
Whether it be in bed, in the living room, or the refrigerator light.
Mm-hmm.
I had a refrigerator. Yeah. I had a refrigerator light problem too. But there's no outside. You stay in your hole where all of the darkness is with you. You're almost comfortable with the darkness to a point.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
No.
But you've grown accustomed to feeling that way to the point where you may not remember what it felt like to feel any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And just the amount of despair.
Yeah.
To where you can't go on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I get up and get out of bed the next day?
Yeah.
I hate my job. I hate where I live. I hate my car.
Yeah.
Like, everything. I can't stand my commute. I don't want to go there. Why do I need to be there? Every possible reason. Every possible negative.
Yeah, mine was totally full of doubt, 24/7, when I would be there.
Yourself, doubting yourself?
Oh, yeah. Doubting myself, my capacity to do things, whether or not I would be able to support myself, even to the point of doubting whether or not I would get to the next day. And then, like you said, it happens often enough, and then you get used to it. So then stepping into the sunshine, when you come out of it, you're going to go back into it. Inevitably.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to come back. So why do I need to be in this happy-go-lucky mood?
Why bother?
Why bother when I'm just going to go right back to where I was?
Mm-hmm.
But then I learned about this key.
You had the key all along.
Yeah. And how thinly, it's not a castle. It's not a cage that I'm stuck in. It's like someone just draped a dark veil over my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very thin.
Instead of rose-covered color glasses, you've got a thin black veil covering your
Yeah.
Your
All I
sight.
had to do was pull it off.
Yeah.
All I had to do was unlock the cage. That's it. And I haven't been back to that cage in a very long time.
Yeah.
This is unmedicated.
Yeah.
I was never diagnosed with depression, and I was
You were never going to go be diagnosed.
No, I was not going to go be diagnosed with depression. Which I feel is a sentiment for a lot of people. Because then that
leads to
I was
other
afraid
problems.
that if I was diagnosed with it,
They medicate you.
I would be medicated, and I was medicated as a child for ADD, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And that now there's something officially wrong with me.
Yeah.
But I beat it with a key called promise. And I haven't been back there in a very long time.
Hope, too.
Hope, yeah.
The Christian in despair and depression was not alone in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
He had hope.
Yep.
He wouldn't have made it out if he had no hope.
Yeah.
So if hopeful, it's plausible. If hopeful had never decided to walk behind him, that Christian would have ended up being that man in the vision, going no hope.
Mm-hmm. He would have stayed in that cage.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
But because of hopeful, and the hope that he had, and our hope that we have is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That there's hope for being redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's hope in the sacrifice that he gave. And then the Word gives you all the information about the hope.
That's what the key is.
And is the key to unlocking.
Yeah. The key called promise is the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's the promises that are in the Bible, that are sprinkled throughout the Bible.
Biggest one's a rainbow that comes to mind. The end of the flood.
Yeah.
Because it was a symbol of his promise. a symbol of his promise, his covenant.
Mm-hmm. And God is very good at keeping his promises.
Yeah. People, not so much.
Yeah.
But.
Which makes it all that more sweet.
It does.
That he keeps his.
And Christian says
even
as much.
Even if we don't. Yeah.
When he was fighting Apollyon.
When he's fighting Apollyon.
See, I'm starting to remember stuff too.
I don't know if anyone remembers. Apollyon is telling Christian about all the bad things that he's done and how often he strays out of the path and how he's not really worthy of his new king's promises.
Grace.
Yeah. And Christian just says, you know what, you're right. I have done all these bad things, but that's what makes my king's grace and mercy all the sweeter.
Yeah.
There is nothing that you have ever done in your entire life that cannot be forgiven.
No.
So long as you ask for it.
Yep.
And you step back on that path and walk it.
Yes, that's the key.
No matter how rough it gets.
Stay on the path. And the path is living the life. And the only way to know how to live a Christian life is by reading the book and by praying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we started doing this.
Yeah.
Because we all need to learn how to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of us anyway.
Yeah.
I hope there are people that are lucky enough that are listening. I hope there's somebody that's listening that's lucky enough.
Our generation especially, we were tricked into believing that religion meant you went to church every Sunday. And that is not at all what it means to be a Christian.
No, it's not.
Going to church is a part of it, but that's not what it means.
No. And what church looks like and looked like then has changed so many different times over history as well.
Yeah.
So you have to read it to understand, and it tells you what to look for to find a good one. And for some people, I know there's house churches that are popping up again.
Yeah.
Where it's you just get together and you study it, you read it, somebody leads, somebody teaches, and that's they went as biblical as they possibly could with it.
Yeah.
So, because tithing used to go to missionaries and helping widows and orphans, and that was it. It wasn't maintaining a building, and it wasn't.
It went to fund Paul.
It went to fund missionaries.
James and Peter.
Missionaries.
Yeah.
And not pastors.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know. Paul does say that there's nothing wrong with making a living.
If that's what...
So to speak, if that's what the church decides to do with the funds.
Well, even as an individual person.
Yeah.
Even as an individual person, if you decide to be an evangelist.
Yeah.
And to go out and spread the good news, you should be supported in such a way that you can
you can do that.
That you can live off of that.
If that's your gift.
Yeah.
And your calling.
Mm-hmm. Even to the point of when Paul is in prison. He's in prison for a very long time, and there's one specific governor that keeps him in prison. Mm-hmm. And the only reason he keeps him in prison, he doesn't know what to do with him, but he's also waiting on Paul to bribe him because you know that Paul has a lot of money.
Or has access to money.
Yeah. Paul had access to a lot of money.
Was it the Thessalonians that supported him? I'm trying to remember which church.
The Thessalonians, he had support in Jerusalem. He had support in a lot of places. I just
remember him rebuking, was it Corinth? I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But he does. He can order up a sack of money and pay this guy off. But then...
He'd be leaving the path.
And then the guy would also have him for bribing a Roman official, which is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't do it. Because he knows...
It's a trap.
It's a trap. And Paul also knows what the end game is.
Yeah.
Just like all Christians are supposed to know what the end game is. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter like what kind of good life you're going through or what kind of hellish life you're going through. It doesn't matter because that's not the end game. That's not what you're supposed to have hope for. What you're supposed to have hope for is the life after this one.
And to help as many people along the way as you can.
Yeah.
To getting there.
Mm-hmm. Paul knows that the world is going to come to an end. That this world is going to come to an end soon.
Mm-hmm. He thought real soon.
Yeah, he thought like very, very soon. Which...
Not God's timetable.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's still really, really soon. We're only talking about 2,000 years.
Yeah.
That's a very short amount of time.
Yeah. To God.
Know, even if it's another 10,000 years from now.
Yeah.
That's
still
a very short
soon.
amount of time in the span of how long the earth has been here. Like as long as the story has gone on, that's a very short amount of time.
Well, and as Peter put it, right? A day to God, or a day to us is 1,000. No. What was it?
A day
to God is 1,000.
A day is 1,000 years. To God, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. I'm not directly quoting, I'm paraphrasing. Do not mistake God's patience for inaction.
For inaction?
For inaction.
Okay.
Because the large swaths of time in which God's plans come to fruition, His promises come to fruition, our short human lives...
Can't comprehend it.
You can't see the beginning and the end.
Mm-mm.
You'll see part of it, but you can't see the full plan come to fruition. We just don't live long enough.
No.
But to Him... like, it's not that long at all.
No.
So, just remember that you have a key. If you're going through this dark point in your life, you have the key. You have the Word. You have the promises that were made.
Mm-hmm.
There is hope.
Yeah, there is hope. And you've already made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
And overcome a lot to get this far.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and don't forget.
Hope.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
Don't forget that despair has fits when it's in the sunshine.
Yes, and to just take a walk outside when you're feeling down.
Mm-hmm.
See if it helps. Can. Getting out of the darkness.
Yeah.
It's important.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's locked into so much darkness now.
Yeah.
Between phones and TVs and cubicles and cars traveling to the cubicles.
And I know some people it's gonna get on your nerves. Like when I would be in that place, happy people got on my nerves.
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
they do.
Why are you so happy? But
well, sometimes it's because I was questioning if it was real or not.
Well, yeah.
If they were really, like, are you really that happy or are you pretending? Because, like, I remember feeling that way with people that I knew were happy and content. Because happy is different than content.
Yeah.
And I think striving for content is probably better in a way. But, like, when you meet this, like, overblown, uber happy person and you're in that state of mind, you're just kind of like, that's not natural. There's no way.
Well, you can tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can still tell the difference as you learn and grow.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't bother you as much in the same way. Now when I see people like that, it makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody that seems that happy a lot of the time if you watch them, there's cracks in the mask that they put on.
Yeah.
And they're hurting, and that they need somebody. They need a person.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they're the rock for everybody else, and they can't let their defenses down. They can't let the happiness mask fall.
Yeah.
So now when I see it, most of the time it makes me sad if I have the opportunity to watch it enough to have to kind of see how they are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is also the reason why we're supposed to be in smaller groups.
So you can tell.
You're not supposed to be. It was never designed to be in a church of 20,000 people.
No, or 600.
Like, the idea is, one, you're all learning together. You're all in close proximity, so you can keep each other accountable, but you can also keep a watch
to help each other.
To help each other.
Yeah.
It's
a whole lot easier to help your neighbor if you know them.
Yeah. And it's a whole lot easier to see that something is wrong
when you know them.
Like, over the past 3 days, like, Phil has gone downhill a little bit. Like,
yeah, something's going on. We need to see what's wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
But we don't. I don't know. We don't do that now, and I'm hoping that we can get back to that, because we're trying to get back to that. We have I call them an accountability group. That's what we're trying to do anyway.
Yeah.
So we're making an effort to have that right now, and I really think that's important. And I think that when our little one's old enough, going to be a part of the accountability group too. Because, I mean, that could be life-changing if every kid had that from an early age.
Yeah. Well, see, this is something I think that we were talking about the other day, is that our kids are raised by kids.
You mean their peers?
Yeah.
You mean they're in a room with 29?
At what other point in history were children grouped together en masse for 8 hours a day?
By age?
For almost 20 years. Yeah.
Well, before school was federalized, I mean, most of the time you had one-room schoolhouses, and every kid in every age went to the same one and in the same grade.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying that education is bad. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the form in which we receive it today is terrible. I hated school. I think there's a lot of people who share that sentiment. I hated it.
Yeah.
I'm in a classroom with 20 or 30 other children if you're going to public school, and you have one adult trying to teach all these kids something.
At all different levels.
That are all at relatively close to the same level, but we're all learning differently. And it just doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't.
No. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. I can't help it. Because it seems so simple.
Yeah.
Why? You know that I've been kind of, my rabbit hole of thing to learn about right now is education.
Yeah.
Because of our hours. And, I'm trying to learn what the Bible says about it and how to go about it biblically. Like, does the Bible talk about education? Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you.
I'm not saying at all that if your kids go to public school that you're a bad parent. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that they're going to, for the next 15 years or however many years they've been in school.
It would be 12 to 13.
They've been in school with kids their age, learning things from kids their age. So when they come out of high school, they're still kids. They're not adults. They're not adults like these people who grew up in the 30s and 40s and went off to war at 17.
Yeah.
They're just not, because they weren't raised by adults.
No.
You have 4 or 5 hours a day during the week to combat 8 hours a day for 5 days worth of influence.
Yeah. I agree. And a lot of those hours you're running around either trying to get them prepared to go there and you to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get home from a long day at work and they get home from a long day at school and you're all tired, hungry. That's if there's no extracurriculars.
Oh, yeah.
On top of it, so...
That's the other thing, is it bleeds over into your home life.
Yeah.
Because of homework.
Yeah. Yeah, homework.
So that's something that bothered me so bad in school. I'm here for 8 hours a day. You're telling me that you suck at your job so much that I have to take it home and do it myself? Like, you couldn't give me this test while I'm here in class. I had to take it home and do it.
Well, at least then you
and
could
probably cheat.
Yeah, I was fixing to say, at least then you had the book, right?
What kid's that? I mean, even
every
like,
kid's going to use the book. You know why? Because they're going to
they
do
don't
what
even
kids
have to
do.
use their book anymore. They just use phones and computers.
Yeah, that's true.
We had to use the book.
Yeah, we had to use the book.
We had to sit and
find
skim
it.
and learn how to skim for hours, just skimming through to
I
find
was
what
pretty
we
good
needed.
at skimming, and I was lucky enough that ours had like the bold.
Yeah.
And I'd highlight them. Because that's how I'd always
Yeah.
make study guides, and we'd make study guides in school. It's like that, but...
I never learned how to highlight. Every book I ever highlighted ended up just the whole book was highlighted.
Oh my goodness. It's like the sentence right after.
I'm like, I'm highlighting
Maybe
so
two.
much. Like, why? I'm just
No,
going to
now
read
it's
the
just
whole
yellow.
thing.
It's just
'Cause
yellow
it's
now.
all yellow.
Yeah, I don't know what was important. Oh, that sentence apparently wasn't.
Yeah.
But I can skip the one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's why I highlight. You don't. I don't let you highlight in my book. That's for me to do. That's why I don't let our little one do it either. She's interested in my highlighter right now.
Oh, she would just be a highlighter.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, that's mommy's marker.
I'm going to highlight the face. And I'm going to highlight this word.
Yeah, that's mommy's
and
marker.
The page number.
But yeah, I mean, education is kind of my thing right now, and trying to learn about and everything, because it doesn't fit. It's you can't do a one size fits all for school.
Yeah.
It won't work.
Mm-hmm.
It'll work for a small amount of kids that can adapt to that style of learning.
Yeah.
But it doesn't teach them how to go off and get, or how to self-sustain.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't teach them how to have a productive adult life.
Yeah.
Chemistry, unless you're going to be a chemist or work with chemicals, doesn't help you do the bills.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that they certainly don't teach in school, because you see a lot of it now.
What,
is
adulting? Where they now teach that at college?
Just self-motivation.
Yeah.
Like,
like
that's a
entrepreneur.
rare thing.
When was the last time you heard of an entrepreneur class?
Yeah.
You have to go to college to learn how to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, our country was kind of founded on it.
Yeah.
You had to be a self-starter. You had to. You at least had to know how to grow food, or be able to have a job to buy it.
Yeah.
From the person that grew it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that ingenuity is not encouraged.
Yeah.
And the parents,
it's
parents don't have enough time to do it when they see it in their kids a lot of the time, and that's just so sad. Mm-hmm. So, trying to figure out the best way and the best means of education for each kid is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like I used to like to write and write stories and draw and all of this stuff when I was a kid. Every bit of that was squashed.
Yeah, don't doodle on your
with
in your
education.
book. Don't doodle on your
it.
test.
No creativity.
No.
We have no room for creativity.
Except for in art class once a week.
Yeah.
Right? Then you can color. But be in the lines.
Creativity is by and part one of those things that leads to entrepreneurship.
You know what else it leads to?
And inventing.
Happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we got off on school and education, but it kind of is important, because nowadays you have kids that have phones at a super early age.
Mm-hmm.
So I use my phone all the time. I ain't gonna lie. It is my go-to tool. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing the podcast right now on here, you know. Yeah. But I still view it as a tool, not as something for social status and socializing. So that's different. And then on top of it, you have a lot of overcrowding classrooms and such, and they're with their own peers. And the one thing that I have learned from reading and trying to learn about this biblically is that it was always kind of taught that the boys are supposed to be with the men and the girls are supposed to be with the women. I'm not trying to like segregate by sex, but basically the children were supposed to be with adults. Yeah. So that they could learn how to do what they would need to survive, to have a job, to run whatever they needed to run, to learn how to be an adult and a productive member of the community and society. That's the point. I know our jobs are more varied and complex now, and no kid at 4 knows what they want to be when they grow up. Yeah. But a lot of them dream, and those dreams get squashed so often. And I'm not saying every dream is, because not everybody can be Superman. So, but let them think. Who knows? The kid that wants to be Superman may figure out how to make a jetpack that can fly, and everybody can be turbocharged.
I really think that everyone has something to offer.
Yeah, they do.
They just have to be taught the skills.
Well, and how to figure it out.
And to be able to figure out how to offer up what they're bringing to the table. Yeah. The issue is that as adults, we're fed into this trap. Yeah. This Vanity Fair in the city of destruction where you're working for little pay, and like they have their traps too. Like part of the reason, and statistically it's supported, part of the reason that depression is such a big thing in the United States now, as opposed to where it was 20 or 30 years ago, is because of social media access. There's been plenty of studies. Yeah. Kids have larger groups of friends,
but less real friends.
But less interaction with people. Yeah. So every bit of posting and sharing this picture and sharing this picture, and people getting likes and
you're
getting
jockeying
dislikes
for status,
and all of this.
24 hours a day.
Status, 24 hours a day, and it's all fake.
Yeah.
Every bit of it's fake.
It has no real application.
Rather than having a group of friends.
Yeah, and getting to have fun.
That encourage you and going and having fun and having friends that go, well, you really shouldn't be doing that because it's not good for you.
They have to be taught that, to know that.
Groups of friends teach each other how to be creative and have fun, and they hold each other accountable.
A lot of times they have similar interests.
Yeah, and kids
just like accountability groups.
Exactly. Kids aren't getting that today, and they're also not learning early on what failure is and what hardship is. They're just not. If you give a kid a participation trophy every time they fail, and
they got something for nothing.
Exactly. So when the path gets a little bit rough, what do you expect them to do? Jump the stile.
Fence. And take the easy way out.
That's exactly what they're going to do.
That's all they're going to be trained to do.
They don't know how to handle the rough part of the path.
The roughest part for ours right now is when I have to take a stuffy. But, hard lessons. And if it's a stuffy, it's a stuffy.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere to teach these hard lessons.
Yeah.
And
if they're supposed to grow up and be adults.
Yeah.
You have to teach them how to be adults.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Before they get there.
Yeah. And the best way you learn that is by being around people that are varied in age and varied and at varying different stages on their journey, just like Christian and Hopeful.
Yeah.
There's the point of Hopeful saying that you are older, further along on this journey than I am.
Yeah.
And I learn from you. And that's important. And I really feel for these teachers now because they're not equipped. And they have all these people telling them what they need to do when they would know better and be able to help the kids better if you just take the restraints off.
Yeah.
They're so restrained in what they can do. And, there's so many good teachers, and I had so many good teachers, and I know so many people that went on to be teachers, and I know how great they have to be. Because I learned a lot from them before they were teachers.
Yeah.
And just to realize how much they can't do because somebody higher up decided that they can't have this, or they can't teach this way, or they can't do that, or I don't know. But
tell me why, because I don't understand this. This is, again, it's getting a little bit off.
Well, we're already pretty off.
Why are most school boards,
not teachers?
Why are they politicians?
I know.
They're not teachers. They're not parents.
Well, some of them are parents.
Well, I'm sure some of them are parents, but
shouldn't most of them be?
Shouldn't you be educated in education to be on the board of education?
Shouldn't you be a teacher?
I mean,
and one that has pretty good
experience.
Yeah. Well, they have to want to hold the position.
Like a lot of, at least, I had a principal who started out as a teacher.
Yeah.
And then became a vice principal.
Well.
And then became a principal.
Yeah.
Of an elementary school.
Yeah.
And then became the principal of a junior high school or middle school. And then a high school.
Yeah.
And kind of like worked their way up through the ranks.
You don't have the work your way up as much as you used to.
But you would think, like, after that would be maybe the Board of Education with all of that experience and knowledge that you have. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it would certainly be...
They'd be good people to look at.
Yeah, it would certainly be a lot more beneficial to the county curriculum.
Yeah.
Than...
Well, to be honest, that's part of it. It should be more local.
Yeah.
Because then, when you start getting counting, when you start getting to county, even then, think about how many thousands of kids that is. It's just so many. So, when you do it in smaller groups, it's just like you're shrinking things, just like we're talking about with accountability groups.
Yeah.
Sometimes less is more. Less offers more in different ways. And I know we got off on a tangent, but we've talked about kids and education and how important it is.
Yeah.
And we talked about phones, but how many kids, even when we were in school, how many kids had depression as a middle schooler?
A lot.
And anxiety?
A lot.
Now they're diagnosed with it. But how many were with our parents? It's less.
Oh, yeah.
Way less with our grandparents. And they were some of the first real ones starting out this standardized education kind of system. If I remember my history right, in generations application, could be a little iffy. Maybe great-grands, depending on how old you are. But the system that we have now is a doubting castle. It traps them away from people that make them feel secure, or should make them feel secure and hopeful, and know them and know that they know, or know what they know and how to help them learn and things like that. Hopefully. Not everybody is gifted in that way. I understand that, but they have their own little world.
Yeah.
And they're alone in it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to talk about what goes on that's bad. Not all the time, and especially if they're not taught to. And I know that we've added so many different, like, counselors and things like that.
Oh,
let's be honest. I wasn't going to open up to a counselor, especially if I wasn't going to open up to my parents. I'm definitely not opening up to a counselor.
No. The other thing is with with classrooms, especially in public school, that are so large, and a teacher has 4 or 5 of them a day, 4 or 5 different classes of students a day. How do you expect them
to be able to have a really
meaningful relationship with their students to the point to where they can pick out
when something's wrong,
that something is wrong with one of their students?
Well, also think about this too when we're talking about doubting castle and despair as relating to our children, and I think it's kind of interesting that we ended up talking about this because nowadays we have to be careful because that's when it starts.
Yeah.
I would dare say not as much in our generation. It didn't start in 5th grade, 6th grade.
Yeah.
For most children, you didn't have that as prevalent as we do now.
Yeah.
But if our kids start having despair and depression and anxiety and all of these things that now have names, that, because when I was a kid, heck, when I was just starting to be an adult, I didn't even know how to label some of these things, But we need to be able to recognize it and know how to equip them with it. Think about this. How much sunshiny weather has been taken away from schools. It's about the test. It's about the results. They don't get to go outside very much anymore.
It's all about the work.
It's about the work. We're back into the city of destruction here. And doubting castle. You're trapped in the place. So it's like a combination in a way. And to be honest, you could argue the same thing with work for adults. But the reason I'm saying this now is because if you can recognize it in yourself as an adult, like I work in a doubting castle type thing, then you can make an effort at lunchtime or on your breaks to go step outside and just kind of, just take a breath and try to help it. But your kids don't have that opportunity. If the teacher says they can't go outside that day, then they can't go outside that day. And whether or not this particular kid was good or not. Recess was always the thing that got taken away. It's always one of the first things to get taken away when the class was bad. Not everyone in the class, but if we see that and we can recognize it in our own lives, our school system was set up to prepare us to work as manufacturing and factory workers. It's kind of changed a little bit. But we're still, it may not be an assembly line, but it's a line of desks or a line of cubicles or it's a line.
A line of people headed
to lunch. It's a line of people.
Yeah.
And so we're essentially taught similarly. You need worker bees instead of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And for you to learn to be a worker bee in a factory style setting, then you are taught from that style setting. Sunshine's not a part of it.
No.
And if we're not careful, we can unwittingly be setting our kids up
to be a cog in the machine that is the city of destruction.
More than that.
Yeah.
We're setting them up to be in the cages in Doubting Castle for their life. More that, to me, that's worse than even the city. Well, maybe not worse than the city of destruction, but equal. And I think it's important that we talk about it and we analyze this part not only as for ourselves and to look at for other adults and how to help other adults, but to really think on these things for our kids. Because I've dove into education and what's the right avenue way harder since going through this book and us starting studying more to know what the right choice is and what the right options are, because I want ours to have, as every parent does, to have the best life possible. But now I have this key and this roadmap that I have a different outlook on life and how to be happy, and it doesn't include social media, and it doesn't include all these other material things anymore that are so readily shoved in our face as well as our kids. So I look at things differently, not only as an adult, but as a parent.
Yeah.
Because I want to be careful to not, just because I step over the hole doesn't mean that my kid can if I don't prepare her.
Yeah.
And teach her how to see the hole. So I think that it's kind of interesting we ended up on that kind of tangent because it's important to look at things this way too, especially if you're a parent, because it's hard. I mean, so many people, they're both working, you know, options are limited.
Yeah.
Private school's expensive. Homeschool might not work for everybody. But at least if you're equipped, then you can help to teach your child. It's going to be hard regardless of which avenue you take. Because either a private school is teaching them something that you may not know what they're learning, if it's Christian-based or secular-based. And then if you're homeschooling, that's a whole nother hard thing in and of itself. You know what they're learning, but man, that's 24 hours a day. And then if you're both working or it's one working and you're taking care of the kids, then you've got to carve out the little bit of time you've got to figure out how to get them to talk and how to get them to learn with you at the same time. And it's not easy because now you're not just looking out for your own soul anymore. You're looking out for theirs. You can't make the choice for them, but you're supposed to teach them so that hopefully they have the information to make the right choice when they're old enough. And I don't know. I worry a lot about kids today. More, of course, now because of ours. Yeah. But it's just so hard for them, and you see all of this despair and doubting castle in kids now.
Yeah.
And as well as adults. But most of these adults, they came to it hopefully as adults, even if they were young adults. They found it, and that's awful. But what's going to happen if we have an entire generation that grows up being in doubting castle from an early age with no idea what the key is and how to get out? So that was a long rabbit hole tangent.
It was. But it was a good one.
It was a good one. I think it was important.
Yeah.
So, do you think we covered it?
I think we covered it pretty well.
All right, I think we covered it pretty well too.
One more thing that kind of clicked after I read this part a while back. So, you have this key. And the key can open any lock in Doubting Castle. Right? So the key is the key called promise. It's the name of the key is promise. Right? So the promise references the promises of God. The word.
Yes.
What is the word called? The truth. The truth. If you're speaking to a Christian.
Okay.
What is in this book?
The truth.
The truth. What does the truth do? Sets you free. There's a famous quote right there.
The truth shall set you free. Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
I like that one. That's good.
Well, just if you're in a dark place, if you're in a doubting castle and you're being beaten down by
life,
this giant despair, remember that you have a key. And that key, there is the promises that God has made to you.
And are laid out in that book.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to read them.
Yeah.
Then you'll know what they are. I like that. I think that was a good way to end this. So now that we are to the end of our tangenty episode, if you would like to see what else we're doing, typically we end with quotes. We haven't been doing that while we've been doing Pilgrim's Progress because there's just too many. So we've been doing visual quotes on our Instagram, Facebook feeds, so feel free to check out one of the links in the descriptions and give us a like or a follow and check that out. Feel free to give us a subscribe if you like what you hear. If you'd like to join us on our other discussions and rabbit hole adventures.
Yep.
And if you haven't picked up Pilgrim's Progress yet, or you'd like to check out a different version, or you'd like to give one as a gift, I have included a bunch of links in the comments. Oh, it's not the comments on this. In this version. In the description.
Yep.
I've given a lot of links. Some of the links below are affiliate links with Amazon, which means that if you happen to do any of your Amazon shopping through one of those links, Amazon will pay us a small commission, which helps us with this project. So if you'd like to support the channel, that's a very easy way to do it, and it doesn't cost you anything. So feel free to check those out. There's some other resources that I add to the descriptions. And I think that's pretty much it. Covers everything, I think, right?
I think so.
Alrighty then. So until next time, keep wandering, pilgrims.